Hi, it's Steffi from Steffi's Beads and Baubles, and I just wanted to show you a bracelet I made. This isn't a tutorial because I just did a charm bracelet tutorial for you the other day. But I just wanted to show you how you can take other objects like buttons and make a really cute bracelet with it. So I'm basically just going to show you what I made and then some extra charms to show you how I made some of the charms. I had an unintentional break for the last week. We had some ice predicted for Texas, and we spent a couple of days getting everything ready to go, prepping the house and everything, and then it was very underwhelming what actually happened. But since I wasn't sure if we were going to lose power, I didn't really want to start anything. And the front of the house is much colder than the back. It's a 1924 cottage and gets very cold. But it's another Valentine themed, and I took everything but from crocheted buttons, which I believe I have. Oh yeah, I've got another one to show you. Crocheted buttons and some unusual beads I had, to modern rhinestone buttons. I think I have a couple of those. And then a very pretty clasp that I already had that I'd gotten on sale years ago that I thought was very, very pretty. And just combined them all and made this really fun bracelet. I took some really cool vintage beads, buttons I mean, and combined them with different elements. Now I had some of those beads, you can't say the brand name, but this style of bead with the big holes, I don't know what that's called. And so I took a few of those apart that were the right color, the necklaces, not the beads, and used those spacers on some of them because they were perfect for sliding on over the loop. You see I did quite a few of those. And I did reds and pinks and a little white to create this Valentine inspired bracelet. I'm not sure if I'm going to list this one because I'd have to ask about $40 for it. Not just for the time, because it was very time consuming, but a lot of more expensive elements went into this one. This clasp, even though I bought it on sale, was a little bit more expensive. A couple of these newer buttons were much more pricey because I bought them recently. And then I have a lot of vintage buttons that are harder to find and a little bit more expensive. So I'm not sure if I'll list it. But these are some of the interesting buttons that I used. And then let me show you some of the charms you can see. Like here is a shank button. So I took a head pin and looped onto it, and then put a pearl big hole bead and a little crystal and looped it together, and that would have gotten hooked directly on there. Here's just a more simple one with a couple of buttons. And same thing, I just came up, I used a head pin to decorate it a little bit and to keep the pin from going through the bead. Went up to the bead, just added the buttons I was interested in, another bead on the back, because you've got to have the whole thing be attractive. That was part of the thing. I couldn't just put the buttons if it wasn't very pretty. I had to put something on the back, like these big shank buttons. I had to definitely decorate behind it. And some of them, like a simple glass, I think that was glass, I can't remember, it might be plastic. I wanted to add a bead on the back to give it a little more, design and make it a little fancier. And some of them I'd put a charm on the end, like this little vintage rhinestone charm. And some, were just more simple. And then I did do a couple of beads. This is with one of those vintage rhinestones. So some of the other ones I made up were, here I took a vintage bead, a button, and then one of those big rhinestone spacers, and another button, and then a little glass bead. This one I did all buttons. I put a real pretty vintage button here, and then just layered some buttons. Here's another one where I just layered a bunch of buttons, and then a bead on the back. And you only go through one hole, so the buttons either have 2 holes or 4 holes. And here's another crocheted button. And I could have gone fancier on the front, but I wanted to see the crochet. And I took 2 buttons. So that was a 3 buttons stacked and a bead on top and bottom. This is a gorgeous, very pretty vintage button. And another spacer, and then some buttons. This was a very beautiful lampwork bead. I used a very glittery button, a crystal with a bead cap. This was a bead. I got this off the same bracelet this was on. And I just put a little bead cap on there with a tiny bead to hold it together. I had a couple beads on this thing, but mostly it was the buttons. I did a couple button bracelets years ago that I just loved and sold. So I thought it'd be fun to make one. This was just a single pendant, and I took the bail off of it. But it was just so reflective and pretty. And that was a beautiful metal. This is metal, not plastic. And I just hung a pearl below it, because even the back is pretty on that one. Little sunflower. I think that one I just hung by itself. No, I hung a bead off of it. So I just had a lot of, this was a lot of fun, but the very nature of it meant it took a long time. This took me a couple days to finish, and so much fun though. And you know, just here's a really pretty button I put upside down, and then put a pretty bead on the back. And used a lot of pinks, some whites, some clears, creams. And I just had a lot of fun creating this little bracelet. So anyway, so I didn't mean to stay away this long. It was just, I didn't want to come down here. My studio is very cold when it's cold out. It was in the teens a little bit. And the wind chills are what, it was very windy that couple of days. And so if you were anywhere near these old windows, and I've got 4 in my studio, it was freezing. So, and for just several reasons, I never came down here and recorded. So, and this bracelet sat for a couple of days for me to finish it as well. But it's, you know, if you go looking, all these buttons, pretty much all of them, I've gotten from estate sales, just buying, or even an occasional antique store, buying a jar or a bag of buttons. And I mean, that was in the buttons, but it's not a button, but it was in with the buttons. This one I took a drop, put it upside down through a spacer with one of those rhinestones on the bottom. It was just a lot of fun to create this pretty piece. And there's another beautiful spacer and a really pretty pearlescent type button and a pearl on the back. Buttons are quite pretty, and you can do a lot of fun stuff with them. I've done the button flowers before, and I have a couple one or two videos on that. And you can do all kinds of button art. So I wanted to show you how you could take, if you wanted to use up some of your older buttons along with your odd beads, this is a great way to do it. This button is very pretty. It's very reflective with all kinds of color in it. And I put a soft pink crystal. And did I put 2 of those on here or just 1? I think I might have. Oh, I did. No, that was only 1, I think. I thought I put 2 of those on here. They're so pretty. You can see no 2 is alike. They're all just a little different. And it's just so much fun to create these. And I didn't know if those would be usable, but I could have done real fancy on the front. You know, done something really pretty. But I figured most of the time you're going to see it like that. So that's why I don't mind if they stagger, because it doesn't matter when they're hanging. Now you put this on your wrist, and the beads are going to kind of go every which way. And it's just a really fun way to use beautiful objects to make a piece of jewelry. I believe there's 32 charms on this bracelet. So it's just a beautiful, beautiful piece. So I may list it. If I do, though, it's going to be somewhere between $38 and $40, because it was a lot of expensive elements and a lot of time to create this. So we shall see. I'm not happy with my placement of a few charms either. I'd have to move some stuff around. Like normally I would not put 2 drops next to each other, and I wouldn't put 2 rhinestones next to each other. So I'll probably like switch one of those for one of those, just to make it a little more balanced. But it was a lot of fun. And you'd be surprised how many beautiful buttons you can find. And you can get them online as well. Sometimes fairly cheap. But all these buttons are older buttons that I've gotten all different places. Some of them are still on the cards. But it's a lot of fun. So anyway, I didn't feel we needed to do another tutorial because I already did one, and it's the basic same thing except going up through buttons. You just pick a hole, you can see, and you just come up to that hole on both buttons. Some buttons have 2 holes, some have 4. It's like that one had 2. And some you can just do a bead in a button. And then this one I wanted to put it pretty on the back. That was just a bead. So it was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed making this. Like I said, I've made a couple button bracelets before that sold, and that was many years ago. My goodness, I think it was at least 2012, I think, is when I made those. So I had a booth in an antique store and sold quite a few of my charm bracelets there, and was also selling them on Etsy and doing very well at the time. I think I must have sold about 15 of these bracelets, not the button ones, but of my charm bracelets. Anyway, so I hope you enjoyed this, and it gives you a little incentive to get out your button jar as well as your beads and use up some of those. You know, if you only have one pink button, you're not going to use it for a piece of clothing. And most of us that are crafters or seamstresses or jewelry makers have a jar of oddball buttons. And that's a perfect way to use them. So these will go in with my current charms, and I'll use them in all kinds of stuff. They could be used for making bookmarks, or again, more bracelets. I don't know, all kinds of stuff. Anywhere you could use a charm, you could use these. This is one of my favorite buttons. Very iridescent. Anyway, just a short little video. I thought I'd share. Let you see what I made. And I hope you're having a wonderful weekend. I'm recording this on Sunday, and I will have this up on Monday. I thank you for watching. And I will be back soon. I'm working on some other projects for Valentine's Day. I'm back in my studio full time again. I just had like 3 days off. So I'll be back soon. Bye.